Hello and welcome everybody to First Page Sundays. My name is Tom Leveen. With me, as always, is the talented Joy, who is helping us.
That's so nice.
Well, helping us moderate a little bit. And our very special guest tonight, I'm super excited to have here with us tonight, Michael Stackpole, author of 180,000 books, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Is that close?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
So Michael Stackpole, most people, I'm assuming, maybe correct me, I'm assuming most people know you from JEDI and your X-Wing series, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself for everyone who is coming to watch tonight.
Let's see, I've been, I think my first two novels came out in '88. I write mostly science fiction and fantasy. I've done a lot of tie-in work. There's Star Wars novels I've done, Battletech, Shadowrun, World of Warcraft, just all sorts of different things. Conan, I've written in the Conan universe. And I greatly enjoy doing that stuff. I also have got lots of stories written in my own original universes. I've done mysteries, I've done science fiction, I've done a lot of fantasy work. I get bored easily, so I tend to bounce around and do a lot of different things.
That's fantastic.
And I write short stories. I've written things of all different sizes. I really like novellas are working really well. In the past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of essentially, they would work out to be novellas, but they're told in a serial format, which is slightly different than taking a novel that's been written and just parceling it out in pieces. There's just a slightly different demands if it's going to be a true serial versus, it's kind of like watching soap operas on television versus a weekly drama. A lot of the same things, but there are also things that you have to do in the serial format that you would not do in the once weekly, hour-long format. So
now, when you say novella, what kind of word count are we talking about?
Novella, you're looking somewhere north of 17,000 words, up to, I suppose, around 40,000. 40,000 is supposed to be a low end. It's the lower end of novels. And if you look on the shelves today, category romances, the silhouette romances and stuff like that, those roll in right around 50,000 words.
One question that I'm sure some of our writers are curious about when we talk about writing for different IP, I would like to know, and I'm sure some of them would like to know, how does one get that job? Like, it seems it seems hard enough to find an agent and try to publish your own work, let alone, Battletech or Star Wars knocking on your door and saying, hey, would you want to do a book for us? So what's that kind of procedure like, and has it changed over the years?
I don't necessarily know that it's changed over the years, in as much that depending upon who owns the property, the procedure is always different. Okay. So, when I got a World of Warcraft novel, for example, it was because one of the guys who was working for Blizzard was a fan of my other books. And so knew me from, a dozen years earlier. And when they were casting about, he says, look, here's this guy, you should take a look at him. The Star Wars stuff, when I got that, even though it's, over 20 years ago, that was a situation where I already had a contract for novels with Bantam. And Bantam was using the Star Wars titles as a way to accelerate the sales for some of their authors. So in getting a Star Wars book, that was seen as a way to get you on the New York Times bestseller list and really to advance your career. And it really does. It raises someone's visibility quite a bit.
Right. Sure.
The Battletech books, I worked in the gaming industry. I knew the guys from FASA through that, and started talking to them. They started publishing novels, and they just happened to need novels at a time when I could deliver what they wanted. And so it just, I'd had the experience because of games. I could show them that I could write a novel. I could show them that I could write science fiction type stuff. And that got me, that got me into the BattleTech universe.
So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, then I'm going to read our first entry. I don't know what we're calling them. Now, this one happens to be, as you know, or maybe as you don't know, but we start off every Sunday by reading something I have written, either published or unpublished, which is a lot of fun. This one happens to be unpublished, and the title of I think it's a novel. It might be a novella because it's fantasy. I'm not sure. Currently, the title is A Tribe of Kasha. And this is chapter 1, first page of chapter 1. Tannen stood in the middle of Desida, the fell town, that's a capital F, the fell town consisting of deep burrows and adobe huts, of baked brick buildings and pools of gathered communal water. In this central plaza, the fell would gather for their great feasts with cooked meat over 3 roaring fires, forming a triangle in the middle of the gravel floor. Homes and other buildings radiated outward from the plaza in concentric circles, each doorway facing the center, the eye, the heart of the fell community. Now Desida lay crushed, crumbled, and burned to ash around him. Bodies sprawled, mutilated on the ground, golden faces of friends and neighbors smeared bloody and upturned to the darkening sky. The sun, it seemed, wanted to vanish and hide its face from the massacre. Tannen desperately wanted to call out to find survivors, but thought better of it. The beasts who had torn through his home may lurk nearby. All the same, he did not try to hide as he picked through bodies and destruction around fires and rubble that had once been home to his family, friends, and clan. Memone. Tannen pushed her from his mind. No, not now, not yet. There were things to do, things that must be done in the wake of this carnage. He came upon the body of an elderly fell, his abdomen split and innards baking in the sun. The smell reminded Tannen of the butchering of sand cats and the mountain deer his people would hunt from time to time. Recognizing the body as a friend of his father, Tannen's vision wavered. He dropped to his bare knees, limbs quaking. Tannen rocked back onto his heels, digging his hands into his eyes. Had the White Riders slaughtered everyone? Had they left no survivors? Would this be Memone's fate? There'd been more of them, he realized, much more. The band of riders at the river had only been a patrol of some kind. The destruction of Desida wasn't the work of a few dozen of them. This was the work of hundreds, maybe thousands. And that is the end of page 1 of A Tribe of Kasha. Thank you very much. There we go. So my thoughts. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Michael?
Well, I think you've got a lot of stuff there that you would expect in a fantasy. Were this up to me, I would reorder some of the things. Mm-hmm. Because what you do is the first paragraph, you start with him having, this is the normal scene. But we learn in the second paragraph, this isn't the scene. What we're seeing isn't normal. So, the emotional hook that I would roll with is, one, how did he survive? Is he crawling out from the cellar where a building collapsed? Whatever it is. And I would have him, emotionally going, just starting out with a line of, I really like this line here. Had the White Riders slaughtered everyone? Had they left no survivors? And take those 2 lines, make those the first lines, almost as a thought as he's crawling out of wherever and going, did the White Riders leave? Did they slaughter everybody? Did anyone survive? And you leave those open questions. Then you describe all this destruction. And after you've described all the destruction, you can go back and talk about some of the normal stuff. But really, the immediate problem here is them, the threat that are coming back, and he's got this friend, girlfriend, whatever, who's missing. Mm-hmm. So those are going to be his immediate things. And so you organize it around that, and all of a sudden, that's the disaster, and he becomes far more sympathetic than apparently looking rather coolly over this, and then seeing a bunch of destruction, and then it's good that he reacts badly to the dead person, but again, to make the emotional connection, you got to name the guy, okay? Because oh my God, that's or by the gods, that's so and so, that gives us, this is someone that it's a friend of his dad. This is someone he knows. This is, he's going to check to see if there's any sign of life. Is this it? Did they haul anybody off? Or any of those things.
So this, friends, is why you have somebody read your stuff besides you.
Yes.
Before publishing it. Because as soon as you say all those things, like Michael's oh, of course. Duh.
Sure.
This is why, and that's why you do it in revision, not in the first draft. Because as we've said, as you said, Michael, just a few minutes ago before we went live, first draft is about digging your hole, right? No?
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then you figure out where everything goes.
Yeah.
So get the first draft out and then have somebody read it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and again, this is one of the things that, especially when you're starting a new work, you're trying to get all the pieces out, you're trying to make sure that you're introducing the character and everything like that. Invariably something gives. Like, for example, there's not a lot of color used in description here.
Oh my God.
Okay. You've got scent used there, but I don't remember a lot of, other than White Riders, I don't remember a lot of color.
Wow.
And those are the things, and that's something that I always drop out in the first draft. Unless it's really locked in, or I've got it, I'll forget it, and then it's when I'm going back through that I go, oh yeah, this guy's probably wearing red. He's one of the city guards. He's got a red cloak. Okay, fine.
Right.
Oh my word. Oh my word.
I'll be damned.
The real question when it comes down to agents, the best wisdom is you don't hire an agent, you marry one. So you want to make sure that you get along with them. The other thing you do have to remember, though, and this is really tough, especially for people just getting their first agent, is that you don't work for the agent. The agent works for you. Okay. And so, if your agent calls you up and says, hey, you really need to be writing centaur mermaid romances because they're going to be hot right now. And, it's just not you. No, you don't have to be writing those.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We should let's revisit that
towards
the end, the whole agent-author relationship, because I feel like there has been and continues to be and probably forever will be a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about how that relationship should be and how it maybe actually unfolds
Sure.
later on. So, yep. Oh, we could go on and on, but we won't. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate that. And now I've got something to do tonight because, I wasn't busy. So our tradition here on the show is we do not announce the author. I, of course, know who they are. If they wish to take responsibility in the comments, they're welcome to do that. But we don't ask anybody to do that. Our second one, I do not have a title, but it is a science fiction Western.
Okay.
The title is Ellie. It didn't used to be this way. I tapped my smoke on the ashtray, exhaling the herb-filled vapor. It was a delightful blend with local plants and made to order at the bar. This bar seems to have it all: smokes, drinks, both alcoholic and not, games, food, gambling. It was all here, meaning everyone in town occupied the small establishment at this hour. Thank goodness all I could smell was my herbal smoke and the alcohol in my friend Zach's breath. How many girly martinis are you going to drink tonight? I raised an eyebrow and flashed him a grin. Zach stared at me, his gold shimmering eyes unamused as he drowned the rest of the His gold shimmering eyes unamused as he downed the rest of the fruity martini through his tiny straw. Why he always used them instead of drinking from the side of the glass, I did not understand. Perhaps it was so he felt he was pacing himself, even if we both knew that was a lie. Setting the drink down, Zach pulled the loose strands of red hair back into his bun. I'll have you know these drinks taste a lot better than that straight alcohol you always drink. I sighed. It's not straight alcohol, it's called whiskey. Tastes nasty is what it is. I smiled a little. Anyway, I should cut you off there. That's your third one, and our contact isn't even here yet. There isn't much alcohol in these. At least, I taste none. Yeah, I have noticed you don't, but that doesn't mean there isn't any in it. We have gone over this. He let out a breath of defeat. Fine, I won't have another until the guy gets here. What's he look like again? Glancing out at the crowded area, I noted all the different species. Humans, reptilians, cat people, creatures made from trees and plants, and even a talking raccoon. There were so many, and yet I didn't see any of our kind. This was the new norm, I supposed. There weren't many of us Caucasians left, pardon my pronunciation. Shapeshifters who were almost all destroyed in the attack 5 years ago. Many of the races didn't like us, as we could turn into any creature or race we wanted. The only way to tell our true race was our gold shimmering eyes. Each zone used propaganda against our race, and eventually we were attacked. The problem was our zone was heavily armored and shielded. Someone had to have given them the codes and told them how to get in. And that person was my ex-best friend, Cornelius Adams. He's a human, which honestly I'm not sure I can trust, but it's the only lead we've got so far. Zach glanced around the room. Not too many in these parts though, so he might know something. Surprised he didn't want to meet in the quarter. That was fair. We were in the Lyran zone, which comprised mainly feline-looking people and some Syrian merfolk. The beach was just on the other side of the city, and were full of shelters for the Syrian to live. It had been so long since I went out in the water for a swim. Taking a deep breath, I reminded myself what happened the last time I jumped into the water and how the Syrians tried to kill me for entering their area. They also didn't appreciate the fact that I could turn into one of them. Live and let learn, I supposed. In some areas, they still considered me a team, so one would think that they would be a little less aggressive about it. I thumbed my revolver, tucked away in my holster. It made me feel a bit safer when I found myself around all these distinct races. And that is page 1 of Ellie. So, couple things. And we also assume these are first drafts. They may not be, but going with that assumption. The thing about any of our kind I thought was cool, and I wish that would have been up closer near the top, personally. You're setting a scene, which I liked. I very much appreciate the scene there. There's that Star Wars cantina kind of feel to it, which is always good, I think. And it didn't occur to me as I was reading it until I was reading it out loud. I wonder if you're going to run into or if you run into problems with the pronunciation of Syrian, because when you say it out loud, it sounds like we might mean Syrian, like the country, and that's okay. That might something to think about. And I was following along okay until the end when we started getting into the Syrian swimming and all that, and I got a little lost on what had happened in the past. So there was that, and part of me, I'm curious to see, Michael, what you think about it. I feel like we've seen this scene before, and again, like calling back to Star Wars, we've seen the bar, all the crazy races, and even the raccoon guy. I was like, isn't that a Marvel character? Who's that little
Guardians of the
Galaxy? Right. I was like, haven't we seen him? Now I don't know if that's intentional or not. Maybe it is, or it might be a call out or a callback or something like that.
Sure.
So okay. So I feel like, again, and I don't write this, so I don't know. That's why we're going to turn it over to Michael in a second. But I feel like you have this enormous responsibility to take something that is familiar, which is, people presumably picked it up because they are familiar with it and they want to read a sci-fi Western. So you've got that going for you. And so this isn't going to be a new setting for them. They're not going to be like, oh my gosh, like they're ripping off the cantina scene. Like, no, they're used to it. This is what they expect. At the same time, it's that whole, what do they call it? Same thing, but different. So you do the same thing, but now you've got to be a little bit different. And I haven't seen, I'm not familiar enough with the genre perhaps, but I would love to see more of something different that's like, oh, this is a new voice on the scene. This is a new way of telling the story. This is a new something. The writing itself, I think, is fine. But let's see what Michael says.
Well, a couple things. Granting that this is a first draft, there are opportunities in here for sensory input that we didn't get. For example, I tapped my smoke on the ashtray, exhaling the herb-filled vapor. What does it taste like? What does it smell like? That will lock it in for me. That will basically, you should use all of your senses. And then when you look at the visuals that we got going here, we just get a laundry list of the alien creatures, and you could take far more time to describe the creatures, then, you know, for example, I don't see anyone here who looks like our contact. Yeah, well, if that tree creature would move his damn trunk, because you could lock that in, and give us a little bit more in the way of the visuals. And again, sound, vision, scent, and taste. Those are all really evocative, especially scent and taste. So anything you can play with there. But the big thing that struck me is this. This is billed as a science fiction Western. Pick out any piece of jargon in there you would recognize in a Western versus a detective novel. In a detective novel, we got the word contact, we have martinis, we have whiskey. No Western has ever had a martini in it. You know, no one says the word partner or partner, well, maybe I'll just mosey around and take a look. You know, if you're gonna identify it as that genre, you have to look at what the elements are that are part of that genre, and you have to apply them. And so it may not be using words that come out of the West per se, but you got to give me a little bit more. I mean, a really good, if you want a science fiction Western, I got to say, The Mandalorian. I mean, it's got the vibe. It's got the dusty town. It's got surly people. I mean, it just feels like a Western. I mean, I think all of us said, holy crap, this is a Western, and so, that's what you want to go with. What I really do like out of this is there was, some decent byplay between the two characters, going back and forth. So, that they've got a little bit of history, and that's good. And if I had to guess, my guess would be that the author was concentrating on that a little bit more to establish those two characters and their partnership than they were worrying about getting the other stuff in. And the other stuff can all be layered in the next draft. I mean, that's fine, but that's what you want to look for.
I have a follow-up question because I run into this myself, regardless of what genre I'm writing, and I don't know exactly how to address it, but you talk about description, which is great, and particularly if we're talking about a genre like science fiction fantasy, where people presumably want a little bit more of that.
Right.
But where I come from, it's lickety split. You got to be Johnny on the spot, get your thing, and the pacing is so fast that
Sure.
Myself, even in these other genres, that like, dude, you can take a couple seconds and talk about the trunk or the thing. I feel like, but if I do, it's too slow and people are gonna stop reading. Any suggestions on how to kind of marry that? Because
Sure, yeah. You use basically an emotional feint. So you hit real fast with that first paragraph, something that locks them in emotionally, and then they get to take a half a step back, describe what's going on for a paragraph, maybe two, and then you immediately hit back onto that point again. So you keep using the emotional touchstone to sort of encapsulate and bind together the description, and you try and keep it, you try not to over describe. And look, it's like in the movies. Get into the scene late, get out of the scene early. So this is where you're cutting the excess material. Put it in there for color, slowly let it develop. But make sure you got that emotional impact. Make sure you got the things that make the characters not approachable, but make the characters interesting and engaging. And the other thing is, every scene, ask yourself, how does this move the story forward? And if it doesn't, find something that makes it move the scene forward. And, introducing a character is not enough. Give me a reason to keep going. So you end this with, and that's when I felt the gun pressed to the back of my head. Nobody's stopping right there. Okay. Not at all.
No. Yeah, you gotta.
Are you a Star Wars fan? And if you can't answer it, that's okay. But I'm just curious. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I was a monster Star Wars fan. Not
okay,
turns out not as big as other people are. I thought I was a huge Star Wars fan, but I've since found out that apparently I'm, yeah.
there's room. There's lots
There are Olympic level Star Wars fans. I'm a Star Wars fan on the level of, let me tell you about that thing I did in high school once. By comparison to being an Olympian. So yeah.
All right, so what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a Star Wars book. And again, if the author would like to identify him or herself, they are more than welcome to do that in the comments, but I will not do so. I will say, however, that this particular piece comes with a sort of a caveat, and the caveat being this is not intended for publication. And we talk after this, we can certainly, we've kind of touched a little bit earlier tonight about how one gets invited to write for somebody else's property.
Sure.
However, I will say that I think it's probably not a bad idea to practice. I mean, it's that no writing. Yeah, if that's what you want. In my estimation, no writing is ever wasted. Whether it ever gets published or not is not irrelevant, but certainly that's just part of it. We write a ton and we keep this much of it.
Sure.
I think it's great that you were writing it, author. So anyway, Untitled Star Wars book goes a little something like this, and after we're done, Michael can correct me on some of the pronunciations, I'm sure. Unless we need like an Olympic level Star Wars fan, I don't know.
Well, that could very well be, yeah.
Keep moving. Keep up with the others. Don't give them an easy target, Maya thought to herself as she ran through the jungle, blaster bolts whizzing past her and her fellow Jedi. Rain pelts the young Mary Allen. Rain pelts the young Mary Allen's face as she runs, mixing with the sweat that's also beading her olive-colored forehead. She quickly looks behind her, managing to catch a glimpse of their attackers every time they fired a blaster bolt. These troopers were unlike the ones she fought before. They were clad in black armor with hints of red. Keep going! We'll hold our ground at the ruins, yelled Alessandro, a human Jedi, as he jumps over a fallen tree limb. Ah! Maya looks to see Vasek, a Trandoshan, fall to his knees after taking a blaster bolt to the back of his shoulder. Vasek! She quickly moves over to him and ignites her lightsaber, turning around and deflecting blaster bolts from her fallen ally. Are you all right? Yeah, I just got my shoulder, Vasek hisses as he hastily gets back up. They both start running, eventually catching up with the other Jedi. The blaster bolts are getting closer. Who in the blazes are these guys? Maya was starting to feel the heat of the bolts on her skin as they flew close by her. Eventually, the band of Jedi reached the ancient ruins and all scurried up a set of steps toward an old temple. At the top, reaching the main chamber, they all scurry around the chamber, covering different entrances. Alessandro and his former Padawan, Rai, covered the front entrance. Vasek moved towards the left side entrance and covered it, while Gita, a blue Twi'lek, covered the right side entrance. This left Maya standing in the middle of the chamber, looking out the front, waiting for their pursuers to attack. But they are nowhere to be seen. Rai peeks out his entrance. Where are they? They were behind us. Gita pokes her head out of her entrance. Maybe they're waiting us out. Preposterous, Vasek added. These troops seem relentless. They have to be planning something. And that is the end of page 1. A couple things I'd like to say. I don't know, and I lost my. I'm gonna make sure. Okay, we'll bring Joy back in for that. So, oh my goodness. Number 1, you have got to get your tenses in order, my friend. You've got so many mixes of past and present in here. It doesn't matter what genre you're writing or if it's your book or property, you've got to decide if it's past tense or present tense and make sure you catch that in your revision. Because here's the thing, and I say revision only because I'm guilty of this myself, usually not in the same chapter, but I will find myself alternating chapters where one is in past tense and one is in present tense. And then I got to go back and decide and change it up. But make sure you always do that. Pick one and stick with it. I have one, and I'm getting a little bit more specific here because this is a nitpick that I always talk about in my dialogue class. Yeah, just got my shoulder, Vasek hisses as he hastily gets back up. Where I come from, you cannot hiss the words, yeah, just got my shoulder. There's an onomatopoeia sort of thing going on with hiss, like there is with bark, and I don't think you can hiss, yeah, just got my shoulder. There's too many hard consonants in it. That's just my opinion. It's not a rule. but I would look for something else. There's something that actually matches what's being said. Small thing, that's a very small thing that I just like to say. And there's a lot of, towards the end, once they get to the ruins, and this again, this is a revision thing. This is all revision stuff. There's a lot of repetition of words like entrance. I think just in one paragraph, we've got the word entrance like 3, 4, 5 times, maybe more.
Sure. And the word chamber.
Yeah, just over and over and over again. Again, cool for your first draft, more important just to get the story out. Totally understand that. When you go back, try to, you want to develop an ear or an eye, whatever you want to call it, for finding those repetitions and finding a way to rework them so you don't have them. Because I guarantee you, at least in my experience with editors, they will sit there and highlight that shit all day long and repetition. So be on the lookout for that. Now, having said all that, what I do love is that we are starting with action, like boom, something's going on, bam. I love that. That's a really, I think, a very strong choice, particularly for this genre. Star Wars, irregardless, the fact that it's, science fiction, adventure, whatever, starting with action is good. I actually I thought I would get lost with how many characters you introduced, but I really didn't. I feel like you got everybody in there, but then focused on just a couple at a time so that it didn't get too jumbled. Like not everybody had something to say, which I see a lot of newer writers doing. They'll introduce 5, 6, 7 people on page 1 or page 2, whatever, and they all have something to say. And like, I'm out, I'm lost, I have no idea. And you didn't do that here, which I think is a good choice. It let me kind of keep track of everybody. Anyway, that's me. I will turn it over to Michael.
Overall, I think it's pretty good. A couple of things that are pet peeves of mine. One, I really hate he said, she said, he added, any of those things. I try and eliminate those as much as possible. I know different people deal with it different ways. I just attempt to get rid of all of them. The other thing is there are lines here that aren't wrong, but they could be better. Take a look after Vasek is shot and goes down. Maya goes over and stands over them and says, "Are you all right?" Not a bad sentence, but are there other ways it could be said? And just as an exercise, you might take every other character in that scene and just say, what would they say to this character?
Ooh, I like that.
So Maya might look at him and say, "Are you all right?" That's fine. Someone else might look at him and say, "How bad?" Or another character might say, "It's just a scratch, get moving." And one of the things that's really important is if you can develop essentially an attitude and a voice for each of your characters, it makes writing dialogue a lot easier, and it makes telling the characters apart much easier, so that we don't need the damn he said and she says. Okay? Because anytime there's an injury, if someone says it's just a scratch, you'll live, suck it up, you automatically know, a line like that is coming from this character here. We don't need a he said or she said or any sort of dialogue identifier, and so you can build there. And two other things. The very last line, Vasek notes, these troops seemed relentless. They didn't seem relentless, they were relentless. Or in dialogue, these guys, these troops are relentless. Or again, some other, the word seemed, anytime you use the word seemed or appeared or felt like or anything like that, it weakens the sentence that you're dealing with. Okay, so you want to do that. And then just in the same vein, and the second point I was going to make, if you go back up to where we're describing Vasek getting hit, Trandoshan falls to his knees after taking a blaster bolt to the back of his shoulder. Okay, no, it falls to his knees after a blaster bolt burned into his shoulder. We don't need the back of his shoulder. Okay, we just need his shoulder. Okay, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, we already have implied, we know it's going to be a shot to the back because they're running away from these guys. Okay, that's just an unnecessary detail. And the reason it's harmful and the reason you want to take it out is it just makes the sentence too long. And in action, you want your sentences a little bit shorter. Okay, you know, so that sentence looks like it's what, about 16 words long. You know, you really want to knock it down to about 8 or 9. You know, so
yeah, it's over 20. It looks like, wow.
Yeah. So, you know, so you just want to chop it. You want to chop that thing in half. You know, in action, it's got to be punchier. It's got to be sharper on average. So you want to drop them back down. But, you know, you want to be looking at, you know, taking a blaster bolt. No, tell me what the blaster bolt does. You know, so you give me a far more evocative sense of what's going on here. It gives me some more urgency and some more threat.
What advice do you give to a writer who has kind of like set this dream up of like, someday
it's 7 o'clock.
Sure.
X, whether it's a comic book or a movie or whatever, what would you, especially if they haven't yet gotten an agent or been published, anything like that, what would you tell them to do? And is it different from what you tell another author to do?
Look at it this way. Anybody who wants to hire you to work on their property wants to know you can do the job. And the best way you can prove you can do the job is to have done it in your own universe, to have your own books. The vast majority of companies I know that are looking to hire authors want people with previous experience. So if, you know, in writing your own novel, in putting together your own stuff, you prove that you've got those skills. They can look at it and decide if they want to give you a tryout, or they may look at it and decide you're not right for this project, you're right for another project. But really, proof that you can do the job is really going to be the key thing for you. And so that's it. You actually have to prove to us that you're actually a writer, as opposed to just a fan with a dream. And Ryder Wyndham, who was my first editor with Dark Horse Comics when I was doing Star Wars comics, one of the comments that he made, and I always found this to be so true, it is easier to take a writer and teach them to be a fan than it is to take a fan and teach them to be a writer. You know, being a writer requires a certain amount of skills. You know, and when I did the World of Warcraft novel, I was over at Blizzard for 2 days and got a crash course in lore and everything about that universe, so I would know what was going on. And it's much easier to teach me that stuff than it would be to take somebody who knew all that and teach them all the ins and outs of writing. And you know, again, there is a lot of networking. I mean, when I got offered a project and I can't do it, or the project is big and they want more writers, I'll reach out to writers that I know and say, what's your availability? What's the schedule look like? You know, how can we put this together? And that is, you know, I think that's, I mean, you see a lot of that. I think the only danger with it is that some people hear that, and the way it translates into their brain is, if I get to know everybody, they will give me work, and no. They won't give you work unless they know you can actually do the job. And if they do give you work and you can't do the job, you're burned forever.
Yeah.
You know, so it's you don't want to blow those chances. Look, there are always opportunities that come and go. You know, I mean, right before I got the Star Wars books, I got shut out of a couple of other projects, which were not nearly as good as the Star Wars books. Had I gotten those other projects, when I was offered the Star Wars stuff, I would have had to say no. So I I got very lucky. That it didn't feel lucky at the time. At the time, it felt horrible, you know.
Yes.
But worked out to be very fortunate.
Michael, where would you prefer people to look you up and find you and get a hold of your stuff?
Well, you know, all my stuff is on Amazon and those things. I've got a website, stormwolf.com. I have a Patreon project, which is patreon.com/Michael A. Stackpole. And probably following me on Twitter, that's the place where I'm most active. And so that's at Mike Stackpole on Twitter. So that's the easiest place. Well, look, I think that if you want to successfully self-publish, you have to make sure that your book is as good as a book coming out of New York, which sounds like a daunting task, but then again, we've all read bad books that have come out of New York. And I think right now, just the way the landscape has changed, I think it's incumbent upon you to write the best book you can. And as we were saying, you know, at the beginning, get someone else's eyes on it. You know, whether you're in a writer's group where you have 4 or 5 people that will help you out, or whether you turn around and hire a freelance editor to go through and bring your work up to par. You know, this is the I won't say unfortunate circumstance, but this is just the situation that it is right now. If I were starting out today, I would have to hire an editor, which back when I started, that wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
You know, you would try and make it the best you possibly could. And again, you'd work with a writer's group, and I certainly did for my first novel and stuff. But you got it the best you could, and you sent it in. Now, with other people getting professional editing, that's setting a higher standard. And you know, publishers and editors are just like anybody else. If they've got 2 manuscripts on their desk, and one they're going to have to do 2 hours worth of work on, and one they're going to have to do 20 hours worth of work on, which one are they going to buy?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it only makes sense. It's the same thing all of us would do.
Yeah, that was really, really cool and very much appreciated. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
And let's see, everybody else looks like, yep, getting ready to call it a night there. So y'all, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. We'll be back next Sunday. I do not have a special guest lined up at the moment. I don't know if I will. We'll just have to see. I do think one of the things we should talk about, though, is this hiring an editor thing, because I hadn't thought about it from Michael's perspective of, you know, if an editor has one manuscript and the other one that's a little not so clean, that's a different conversation. So we may have to discuss that next week. We'll just have to see. Meanwhile, hit me up on patreon.com/Tom Leveen, all one word, and follow me in all the usual places. As long as you spell my last name right, you should be fine, although most of you probably know that. All right, thank you guys very much for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and remember to keep writing, all right?